Okay, y'all. It's about I don't let's see what time is it. It's about 6:15 in the rising, and I am getting ready to start my day. And I was checking my messages, and someone had sent me, a friend of mine had sent me a clip about submission. And I've noticed that nowadays human beings, since being introduced to the concept of submission, has been obsessed with it, particularly men being obsessed with submission, but women also, but not to the level of men. But however, it just got me thinking, and this is my opinion, and we can argue about my opinion in the comments if you guys would like. But in my opinion, and based upon my research, ever since the narcissistic, sociopathic ideology of submission has been introduced via religion and the colonization of indigenous peoples via Christianity, which is also Catholicism. People have been obsessed, completely and utterly obsessed with this cult thinking of submission. And somehow they have associated dominance because, let's face it, if someone is submitting, then someone has to be dominant over top of them. So they've somehow equated this slave form of having a relationship as being love. You hear these men who are actually not well versed in healthy social skills will be online having these conversations about how modern women, meanwhile, they're also modern men. I mean, come on, we are in modern times, so everyone is modern, right? So these men who have the most to say about modern women while they're using modern technology like a cell phone, like social media to get out their ideas, which are unstable, but they keep saying modern women don't want to submit and this and that. That's really extremely disturbing. That's red flags, and it tells me that these particular people who subscribe to that mindset don't truly understand what abuse is. They don't know what financial abuse is. They don't know what emotional abuse is. They don't know what physical abuse is. They don't know what psychological abuse is. Because if they understood what these sectors of abuse is, they wouldn't sit up there and have conversations that include another human being submissive in a relationship, because that is abuse. I work in the healthcare field, so I have to be trained in what abuse is, how to spot abuse, and what to do with what I see, how to empower the person to get out of those situations. When a man requests of you to be submissive and he tries to gaslight you and tell you that this will make you a more desirable woman or a better woman or a real woman, that man is an abuser, and you should run as far as possible. When a woman approaches a man and tell him that he needs to be submissive and he needs to sacrifice his happiness for her and all of his money for her and so on, that woman is an abuser, and that man should run as far as he can. Relationships should not be built upon the foundation of suffering. And if a relationship is being built upon the foundation of submission, Someone in that relationship dynamic is suffering because that means their opinions are not being valued, their autonomy is not being valued, their choices are being removed from them, and that is an abuse dynamic. And in some cases, their ability to be independent by way of making their own money is being removed from them. It's all the elements of abuse. Somehow, abuse has been normalized as love, and it is not. Love involves the respect of two human beings who have autonomy to make their own decisions, two autonomous human beings coming together and making a collective decision to share a space with each other for however long that space exists. This concept of together forever is another form of abuse and entrapment because it removes the decision of one of the grown adults to leave the relationship whenever they choose to leave the relationship. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if one party was happy in a relationship and don't see a reason why the other party should have left the relationship. That doesn't matter. What matter is that person has the choice and the right to remove themselves from the relationship. But somehow, relationships have become a cult of dysfunction and trauma, and it's been all normalized like that's to be expected in relationships. And me personally, I am not interested in those type of relationships. I am not interested in those you gotta fight for your love relationships. I don't want those. I don't want that type of relationship. I don't want a relationship that involves any sort of submission. I am not going to be dominant over my spouse. I don't want them to submit to me, and I am certainly not going to submit to them. People will try to gaslight you and tell you that these type of relationships are successful, and they are not. Just look at the evidence. At some point, the person who is playing the submissive role has a mental breakdown. They either can't take it no more and leave, or they mentally shut down, or their body tells on them because they have high blood pressure, they have heart disease, they may be overweight for from trying to eat their stress away. It's not sustainable at all. It is not sustainable at all. Another example that these abusers like to use is, oh, women are not like how their grandmothers used to be. Well, all of our grandmothers wasn't on it, right? They wasn't on it at all. Some of our grandmothers was, doing her thing, and she was single because she refused to be in prison. Other women didn't have a choice. They had to get married in order to be able to survive because again, they couldn't have bank accounts. They couldn't work. I mean, their only means of survival was directly tied to imprisoning themselves with a man who had the idea and the ideology of submission. Now, with that being said, these same men who call themselves modern men, the manosphere, whatever, I call them abusers. They want a woman to submit. They ridicule a woman because she has chosen to educate herself. and she knows how to provide for herself. And apparently, they have a problem with independent women. I don't understand why they would have a problem with a grown adult being independent and capable of taking care of themselves. And it's insane, but yeah, this is the insanity of their mind. They have a problem with independent women, but then they also have a problem with providing full and complete financial support for women. So again, I don't really understand how that works when they say that they're not going to spend money on women, but they also don't want the woman to provide for herself. That sounds like suffering to me, and I'm not personally interested in that. It's a lot of contradiction going on. With that being said, the whole ideology of a woman submitting and the man being in control all the time, it doesn't really fare well for the mental health of the men either, because they break down, because they feel like all the pressure is on them, all the responsibility is on them, and they just can't take it anymore. So they in turn imprison themselves. And because they're frustrated, because they've created this situation to where all the responsibility is on them, they then turn around and take it out on the woman, and they take it out on the children. So as you can see, that type of relationship is just, it is not sustainable. And someone being together for years doesn't mean that the relationship is sustainable. It's still a mess. It's still got cracks and holes in it. It's just not sustainable. And in my opinion, we need to move away from the narcissistic and sociopathic idea of submission in a relationship to include the idea that our children must submit to us. It's like we are continuing the programming of colonizers. It's everybody must submit. We even believe that our animals should submit to us, which is just complete and utter insanity as well. It's like we're taking away everyone's right to be autonomous and make their own decisions. Like, we all have brains. Our brains was created for a reason, to control our body, to give us the ability to make decisions, whether that decision is right for us or wrong for us. We are still able to make those decisions. And the way that we as humans interact with the world is, we either want to dominate everything around us, or we want to be dominated by everything around us. And just look at the world. It's not sustainable at all. Instead of respecting everyone's choices within reason, because some people choose to do a lot of insane things that is not necessarily protecting human life or dignity. But I'm speaking in the context of the protection of human life and dignity. Well, guys, that was all that was on my mind. Let's discuss it in the comments. What do you think? Are you okay with submission? Do you believe submission involves abuse? I would really like to hear, what do you think? Have you had experiences with being in a relationship that either you were submissive or you were dominant? And do you believe that that type of relationship is sustainable? One thing I would tell you, globally, people are having difficulties being in relationships with adults and being happy. I teach English online. So I have students from Japan, China, Turkey, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Korea, Italy. So I get a good mix of people. And one common theme amongst everyone. It's the difficulty of either sustaining relationships, finding relationships, sustaining happiness, or finding happiness. Let me know what you think in the comments.